I'm your host, Miko, and today I'll be talking to you about how to tune in Gran Turismo 7. This is a full comprehensive guide from starting with picking your build all the way to optimizing it to be a track-focused weapon or to hit PP limits. So, first thing I'd like to give you is a sort of tuning cheat sheet right off the bat. This is, if you're more impatient or, you want something to look back at to when it comes to tuning. I'm going to display it right here. Feel free to screenshot it. I know that YouTube is a very contested space, and there's another YouTuber named Fossil Fueled who's been doing the same thing as I am with this tuning guide. Please give him all the love. The link will be in the description. He really deserves it. Throughout the video, I may be using the term stiffness to describe certain tuning aspects. Those aspects are highlighted here with the arrow. So whenever I say I'm making something stiffer, I'm talking about these settings. Understeer is caused by a lack of front grip. Your front tires skid and your car does not rotate successfully for a corner. Oversteer is the exact opposite of understeer. Your rear wheels skid and your car over-rotates for the corner. Tuning is focused around a grip bounce philosophy. If you add grip to the front, you should try and do the same to the rear. However, taking advantage of these imbalances helps get the car to how you want it. I'm going to list some very common drivetrains for you to know what to do when picking your build. This car is a 180SX. It is a front-engine rear-wheel drive. This means that the engine's in the front while the driven wheels are in the back. It's the gold standard for all track builds in GT. Typically, the front-engine rear-wheel drive layout means that you're going to get a lot of oversteer on the throttle. However, the engine being in the front means the weight's on the front, so the slides are more predictable and easy to catch. The second car I'll be presenting is the Integra Type R. It has very similar performance to the 180SX, however it is front-engine front-wheel drive. This means it's very understeery and your front wheels are doing almost all aspects of handling, from cornering, braking, to acceleration. This means that you need to be very good at working the front tires and not to be gentle on your vehicle. However, it does provide extreme consistency when at the limit. The third and final car I'll be presenting is a Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 3. This car is front-engine, all-wheel drive. It's also the heaviest, yet also most powerful of the bunch. In general, all-wheel drive cars are heavy, as they have to have a driveline going to the rear and extra CV axles in the front too. Another aspect of all-wheel drive cars is that they're the most easy to drive. You can be very aggressive on the throttle, as all four wheels are providing acceleration. However, all-wheel drives aren't the fastest. Even though you are using the most amount of tires to accelerate, your handling suffers. You face a lot of understeer in an all-wheel drive, much like the front-wheel drive cars. A little less though. Let's be honest, most of you guys are visual learners. You want to see the cars in action, so I'll do exactly that for you. Alright, now we are watching my past lap. So, this is the 180SX I spoke about earlier. Front engine, rear-wheel drive. This is the most balanced layout. As you can see through that corner, this thing is some pretty good high-speed cornering. It's on comfort softs right now, but it's still doing pretty good. In fact, all these cars are going to be on comfort softs. It's just the most fair way to look at them. Throughout the lap, you're going to see that this car has a lot of body roll. All these cars do. But it's because they're running stock suspension. Stock suspension is focused around driver comfort, being able to take more road imperfections and other bumps as you drive. So, when we take this to the track where there isn't many imperfections, this gives way to a sloppy handling feel. The front engine rear-wheel drive layout of this 180SX again makes it really good in these high to mid-speed corners because the work of the tires is being split up between two axles. The rear is accelerating while the front is doing the cornering. When it comes to chicanes, the 180SX does actually very good. This is most likely due to it being a pretty soft setup, especially for the front axle. Soft setups in the front mean that more weight can be shifted onto the front, so when you trail brake or slowing down, your front axle gets a lot more grip and your tires can turn better. While it may feel like I'm trying to sell you on the FR layout, they're not perfect either. If you're on the throttle too early or running a high power build, expect a lot of oversteer out of the corners. Like that hairpin there, I actually struggled on the corner exit a good amount, and I need to be quick to respond and deal with the counter steering. So, FR layouts are very fast and well balanced, however they require you to be on top of your movements. If you're not, they will kill you. This problem shows up especially if you're running a race car with stiff suspension. If you hit curbs or are just too aggressive with the throttle, most movements of the car will happen very quickly, so you can be on top of your game. The good thing is that while you have the engine in the front, you can handle slides pretty well in an FR. They're the gold standard for drift cars too. Alright, so I want to talk about a couple things here. In general, the 180SX did pretty darn good at what it needed to. However, the low speed oversteer is something to note, and also the body roll and overall soft suspension layout. It is problematic, but we're going to work on that in the tune. It's important to see these things. When looking at a car to see how you should tune it, look at how it handles at low, medium, and high speeds. That's what I did in the 180, and you should try here with the Integra. This corner right here really shows you the aspects of front wheel drive handling. As you can see, I turn in extremely early and I try and trail brake to loosen the rear wheels as I enter the corner. While mechanically, front wheel drive is one of the simplest layouts for a car and also the second easiest to pick up right behind all wheel drive, you still need some advanced techniques to use it. The main thing you want to focus on in a front wheel drive build is trail braking. This is so you can get that rear end out smoothly and safely for a corner. This is primarily due to the fact that they have a lot of on throttle understeer as the front wheels are doing both cornering and acceleration. So the strategy you should have when trying to drive front wheel drive is to get some early corner oversteer so that when your car does eventually face understeer on its way out, you'll already have the rear end kicked out to where you need it to be. This strategy isn't that great for chicanes. Because you're often trying to get on the throttle extremely early for the second corner of a chicane, you're not going to have that oversteer necessary for the entry to the second corner. Like almost all other front wheel drives, this car has a lot of low speed understeer when exiting the turns. Front wheel drives are especially good if you like to kind of chuck your car into corners or hurl it, whatever you want to say. You gotta get that early corner oversteer to best use them. If you don't want to do that, you can still get some pretty good consistent laps with them, but they're best when done at their limit like that. Another thing with front wheel drives is that the front wheels are doing almost all the work. The rear wheels are kind of just there for the ride. So, they're really bad with tire wear when it comes to endurance racing. I would not recommend using them for PP limited endurance races. While not as beloved and as mainstream as rear wheel drives, front wheel drives are absolute toys to drive. So if you want a fun time attack build, I'd recommend it. Looking more in depth on this Integra, it did pretty good. It does have some understeer, low down, but that's expected in a front wheel drive. However, one thing Honda did great is that lift off oversteer. It is key to making a front wheel drive handle good. And it's something that I'm going to try and highlight, and you should also aim for when making a tune. There's a reason I painted the Evo in yellow. Enjoy! Seems like past Miko put his playlist on. Don't question him. He's trying his best, and he's damn racing his best. Because this car was bred on dirt for rally racing, it is a very soft suspension setup. I'm going to try and tune that out when I make the race car. Again, understeer is the theme of all-wheel drives. You're gonna see, I do not exit well here. Talking about this Evo and all-wheel drives as a whole, this thing is stupidly understeery. When combined with its high power and the overall pretty loose tires considering its performance, it was an understeer king. What I would focus on when tuning this car is hopefully sending more power to the rear, because I believe this is our front biased all-wheel drive. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to run a stiffer setup. All-wheel drives are good though, because they have a lot of potential to put power behind them, as they'll always find grip. When it comes to building your car in GT7, most of you guys know what to do. Small turbos give torque, big turbos give power. It boils down to basically common sense and general car knowledge. Some mods, however, especially the permanent ones, are special. The biggest one to me is the stroke up kit. If you're going for a fun car that revs high, you do not want to put the stroke up kit. Another one too is high compression pistons. It only is for NA cars, so if you want to save yourself some money, don't buy it if you're running boost. Let's go over to GT Auto now. The wide body kit is a very important part of your car, and it greatly helps with performance when it comes to turning. It does hurt your top end to have it installed, but it's overall a net gain in times. Make sure you're running wide rims, or else you're not going to get the benefits. Another thing too is that putting a wide body removes all previous cosmetics. So make sure you do it first before putting other parts in your car. When it comes to tuning in GT7, the roll cage is an unsung hero. It does actually stiffen your car's chassis. So if you want a more responsive car, consider putting one on. It also makes you look race car, bruh. Front downforce is extremely useful in helping your car's performance. It increases top end and helps you get more front grip. Side skirts are really just there for the aura points. Putting a rear bumper mod in your car is extremely potent and will do a lot to increase its performance. Putting on these diffusers actually increase top speed and also increase your downforce. Even the small little winglet thingies too. So consider putting one on. Even if it's subtle, it will do a lot to your performance, even if they always aren't a looker. The rear wing is the fashion statement of your car. It's one of the most standout parts of it visually. It also is pretty standout with performance. Going wingless can increase top end and provide some downforce tunability. So if it's tuned low, you can actually get some pretty good top end. The type style wings do provide a pretty good amount of downforce. As long as they aren't full-on race car parts, they do a little less than the custom wing. However, they still do help with performance. Consider putting one on if visuals matter, but you still want some good amount of pace. If high downforce is your goal, the custom wing will provide it. I will say with GT as a whole, the more extreme a body mod looks visually, the more extreme it's going to be for your performance. So consider that whenever tuning your car. For this YouTube video, I maxed out my cars to try and get the most amount of performance out of them. You do not have to do this. You can tune them the way you want them. I just want to see their maximum potential. You can even run engine swaps. I didn't do that in this video. Here is where I discuss how to tune your suspension. Here is the recommended order on how I would do it. Remember, tune one at a time in small increments. This so you can see what actually helped your car handle better. Adjusting your ride height is quite easy compared to other settings. In general, the lower the better. This is because your center of mass is lower, and the car will feel more responsive because of that. Adjusting your ride height can also shift the grip bounce of your car around. The taller an axle is, the more grip it's going to have. It's also going to lose that grip more gradually. So, this can be especially useful for high-power rear-wheel drive cars. You can lift up the rear end so that when they start accelerating and squatting, they have more predictable and smooth handling. Test driver Miko making some 4-rotor music. As you can see here, we're running a high body height. This will cause the car to behave more vague and like it's floating over the road more. While this can be useful to have a more forgiving car or when elevation changes are extreme, it does hurt the car's overall handling. You're going to see here that I have to turn in extremely early because the car is less responsive due to its increased ride height. Body height, I would say, is one of the most track-dependent aspects of your tuning. If your track has a lot of elevation changes, consider going higher. The Nürburgring is a good example. This demonstration features a car with low body height. You'll see that the rear end kicks out a lot more on the launch. This is because low body height cars are more twitchy and have less pronounced weight transfer. In this case, we wanted more weight on the rear. The low body height makes this car far more responsive on turn-in. It also allows it to corner a lot hotter. Low body height isn't all positives. There are a couple negatives. A common weakness in low body height cars is sudden bumps or elevation changes. If your track has serious curbs, or you're going for a track with heavy elevation changes, low body height can result in unexpected and poor handling. Make sure your car is tall enough for its steering. If you're running a lot of steering angle or very low fenders, you need to make sure your car is high enough to fully achieve its angle. If you go too low, you can have a sudden understeer. Natural frequency is a measurement related to your spring stiffness. In general, the higher your natural frequency, the more race heavy your build is. So as you run more downforce and more aggressive tires, you should try and aim for higher natural frequencies. Considering the cars that we're going to be tuning, we're mostly going to be in this range of natural frequencies. Here, we're running a low natural frequency. Natural frequency is a very important aspect of adjusting your understeer-oversteer balance. Reducing the natural frequency on an axle will overall increase that axle's grip. So, if I soften the front, I'm going to have more oversteer. If I stiffen the front, I'm going to have more understeer. And vice versa for the rear. In general though, a low natural frequency is going to have a lot more movement in your body. So, this means it's going to roll more, dive more, and squat more as you go through the track. Low natural frequencies can also help for tracks that have more aggressive bumps or curbs. If you're hitting these apexes aggressively, you may get sudden loss of grip. A low natural frequency will reduce that effect and will make the car overall more forgiving to drive, however, less responsive. A high natural frequency is the opposite. A stiffer axle will overall reduce the grip on those wheels. So, if I was to run a stiffer setup in the front, I would have more understeer. High natural frequencies are in general more responsive. The car doesn't dive as much, roll as much, or squat as much. So, if you're looking for a twitchy and more lively car, high natural frequency is the way to go. As you can see in the lap, I faced a little bit of oversteer. That's because high natural frequencies are in general more aggressive. They lose grip more rapidly and are more suited for more aggressive tire compounds. So, if you're focused on having a very responsive car, a high natural frequency is a good way to go. Downforce is another important factor in tuning your natural frequency. As seen on screen, high downforce requires a stiffer setup. You can also do this related to how your car's downforce is. So, if you have a very high amount of downforce in the rear, but not in the front, you should try and have stiffer springs primarily in the rear. While this may shift mechanical grip off of it, the aerodynamic grip counters it out. You can also try running a taller setup to counteract the downforce, because when you're at race pace, the car will be leveled out. You should try running a setup proportional to your downforce. So if a lot of it's on the rear, consider making your rear end taller. This especially prevents your car from bottoming out across elevation changes. You can tell your car is bottomed out when it has a sudden loss of grip and very unpredictable handling. You won't really have control over the car. You'll notice with the Silvia that it gets lower the faster it went. Take a mental note of its current height, and as it slows down, you're going to see it lifts up. When it's parked, it's going to be significantly taller than how it was previously. This is the reason people tune their natural frequency in direct proportion to their downforce. The more downforce, the higher natural frequency. Here is a demo I made for roll bars. Roll bars are effectively a linkage between the two sides of the car. The higher the level for your roll bar, the stiffer it is. So, as you can see, two counteracting forces are blocked. This prevents roll. Roll bars function a lot like natural frequency. So, a softer setup will overall feel less responsive but more forgiving to drive. However, you're not going to notice roll bars when it comes to the dive and squat of your car when braking and accelerating. So, you can use roll bars as a sort of natural frequency, but only for corners. So, if you have a car that has too much squat or weight transfer as a whole when accelerating, you can run a very stiff natural frequency, but then soft roll bars to counter that effect. Soft roll bars are especially useful in front-wheel drives, mainly for the front end. In the rear, you want an extremely stiff roll bar. The soft roll bar in the front means that more weight can get on the outer front tire and help with the cornering. Here we have high stiffness anti-roll bars. You're going to see here that the car does dive and dip a little bit. However, when it comes to cornering, the car is practically locked up and there's not much body roll to be seen. High roll bars are good for responsiveness. However, they do make the car twitchy. So it's another balancing act you gotta follow. Stiff roll bars are especially useful in front-wheel drive cars for the rear. If you put a stiff roll bar in the rear, you can get a lot more oversteer in the corners, helping reduce the understeer problem. You can also put a stiff roll bar in the front of a rear-wheel drive to give it more stability when accelerating out of corners. High roll bar stiffness can also be really useful in high-power rear-wheel drive cars. Those vehicles crave a lot of squat, so a low natural frequency. However, you can run stiff roll bars to give more responsiveness. You can imagine negative camber as a slider between straight line grip and cornering grip. The higher negative camber, the more cornering grip you're going to have. I'd like to say though, don't go over 3 degrees. That's too much. Way to check your camber is to go into a time attack and check the way that your car's wheels line up with the road when performing a corner. In this case, I picked the high-speed corner at Kyoto. So, you want to get in the race photos and really look close to your wheels. Running a little less camber relative to the road can help because you have more straight line grip. Toe is a little thing you can add to some tunes to help it handle. In general, you should have 0 degrees of toe. You should only ever do toe in on the rear and toe out on the front. Toe in the rear will make the car feel more steady and stable. Toe out on the front will make the front end feel more responsive. This means you can turn in later for corners and have a more responsive handling feel. Too much toe will increase tire wear and reduce your top speed. Damping is a way to reduce oscillations in the springs of a car and also a way to reduce the overall movement of forces around it. Expansion damping focuses around how weight is shifted off, while compression damping is related to how weight is shifted onto an axle. Here, we're running low suspension damping. This means that the movements of the car are going to happen very quickly as there's not much to resist them. Off the line, there's going to be a lot of squat extremely quick because there's no resistance. You're going to notice on the straightaway that the car quickly dives and then returns back to a squatted position. You're also going to notice that it turns in very aggressively. Damping is effectively a temporary stiffness. It doesn't change how the car's settled position is when cornering and accelerating or braking. However, it changes the way it gets there. You're going to notice that almost every motion in the wheel comes through on the car. This makes them less forgiving. However, you can have some advantages, especially when it comes to expansion damping in the rear, as you can have a more stable car. Or when you have low compression damping in the rear, as the car will squat down more and have a lot more stability, especially for all or rear-wheel drive cars. This car has high suspension damping. You're going to notice it remains effectively flat throughout the entire straightaway. It also slightly turns in slower and settles slower than the one with the low suspension damping. The biggest thing you'll see though is that the small motions in the wheel and the pedals don't come through the body as much. High suspension damping is effectively a delay between all the motions in your car, as it makes the vehicle stiffer. So it can be kind of more forgiving at the limit. High suspension damping is especially useful for aggressive tires and high natural frequencies, as the forces on the car are going to be more aggressive, so they're going to require more damping to get rid of them. Some cars in Gran Turismo have something that I'd like to call escudo syndrome. This is mainly in all-wheel drive cars. They have a lot of oversteer on the brakes, so reducing rear expansion damping can prevent this. We're done with mechanical grip. Let's focus on aerodynamic grip. Downforce is proportional to your car's speed, and it's basically like adding additional weight without the inertia. So, your tires have more grip, but you don't have to deal with the extra sloppiness of having a heavy car. Downforce is proportional to your vehicle's speed. So, the faster you go, the more it's going to help you. In general, the rule of thumb is that over 45 miles per hour, downforce plays a part. Downforce does add more drag though, so if top end matters more than aerodynamic grip, consider running lower downforce. This will help your car be faster and more fuel efficient. Downforce is a key factor in tuning your car's understeer-oversteer balance. Here we have high front downforce. This means you're going to have a lot of oversteer as the front has a lot of grip. High front downforce is especially useful for front engine, front wheel drive cars, and it can also be useful for all-wheel drives, as long as they're biased towards the front. High front downforce means that your front tires have a lot of grip in the front, especially when at speed. So, small steering inputs will come through the car. This can lead to high-speed oversteer, which is extremely scary to drive. In general though, high front downforce can be extremely quick. However, it may not be as consistent and it may feel twitchy too, because your car will have very unpredictable behavior at high speed, and you need to be ready to react to it quickly. Be honest with yourself. You might think you can handle it, but sometimes you can't. Here we have a car with high rear downforce. High rear downforce means that we're going to have a lot of understeer at speed. You're going to notice on this first corner here that this S2000 struggles to stay on track. While this is partially due to my own driving, it is something to notice with high rear downforce cars. As you can see through that corner, high rear downforce gives a lot of understeer. I was barely able to stay on track through there. High rear downforce is more stable though, and can feel more consistent, as the car will have predictable handling at high speed. High rear downforce is also good for hitting PP limits, as you can often tune out most of its issues by adjusting your suspension settings. With high rear downforce, you should really consider your track. Over major elevation changes, especially those downhill, you will often find yourself performing big wheelies. Be ready to catch these in case. The differential is a part of your car's axle that makes it so that the wheels can turn at different speeds. This is especially useful for cornering, as one wheel doesn't need to skid to match the speed of the other. However, running an open diff, which is what most stock cars have, can lead to something known as one-tire fire. This is because the diff takes the path of least resistance. So once one wheel skids, it's going to keep sending torque to that wheel. This can lead to very unpredictable handling, as only one side of the car is sliding while the other isn't. Here we have a car with a low diff lock. In this case, the diff is open. So that means that only one wheel is really losing grip and has the most torque sent to it. You want a low diff lock for the front, as the speed difference between the wheels in the front is the most extreme, and also you can have the most predictable behavior in the front. Here we have a car with the closest we can get to a welded diff or a locked diff in Gran Turismo. As you can see, both wheels are spinning at the same rate and they both get the same amount of torque, which means that they both spin up. This is causing me to have to counter steer to match the behavior. However, high diff locks do provide the most amount of grip when exiting corners in a straight line. They also have the most predictable slides. However, running a high diff lock on D-cell can lead to your car being very understeery. The goal of tuning your transmission is to stay in the peak power range for as long as possible. This means making your gearing longer or shorter depending on how it's shaped. We are now going to compare two cars in a 2-kilometer drag race. You'll notice the short gearing actually gets to the first kilometer faster than the one with the long gearing. However, it quickly runs out of legs at high speeds, and it has a lower trap speed overall. This is because the short gearing means that the car is out of its peak power at higher speeds. It also means that it eventually hits the car's red line and literally cannot go any faster. Short gearing is especially useful for tight tracks or lower power cars, where it takes a while to get to the top speed, or the vehicle will never reach its top speed by the end of the straightaway. Here, we have the same Volvo 240, but now with longer gearing. The first two gears are slightly shorter than what the final drive would let on. This is so that we can have a more fair experiment between the two cars. You'll notice the longer gearing is slower to accelerate up to the first kilometer, as it has less gears to use and is overall staying lower in the power band. It also has less torque being put down. However, at the higher speeds, this long gearing helps a lot, as there's a lot more revs to use and the car is closer to its peak power. If you're going for tracks with long straightaways, long gearing is your best bet. In general, you want to have tighter gears up high so your car is closer to peak power and has more torque at high speeds. This is the part where I discuss the hard to classify parts of tuning. These are still extremely important. The first part is brake bias. You want a positive value or a more rear-focused brake bias if you want more oversteer on the brakes. If you want more understeer and stability on the brakes, you want to go for a negative value. Another thing too is that you should put your brake bias to where your tires wear out the least. This will cause more even and predictable handling. The torque vectoring diff is very important when tuning for all-wheel drive cars. You want to set a larger value to the rear if you want a more rear-wheel drive behavior. This will mean that you have a lot more oversteer on the gas. If you want to have a more front-wheel drive feel or more stable car, you can set more of your torque to the front, closer to 50-50. This will have it understeer more on the throttle. Remember to have your anti-lag on too. You can also turn it off to save yourself a couple PP points. It doesn't affect performance too much, but it does help. A strategy to hitting PP limits effectively is putting racing hard tires on your car. Racing hard tires do reduce its performance and lower the performance rating of it. However, this means that you have performance on the table for other aspects. This can involve adding more power or more downforce. You can also go further without pitting, and since the GT pit crew is quite slow, the less you can pit, the faster you'll be in a race. Another strategy you can do is have a lot of rear downforce, but not a lot of front downforce. This does cause a lot of understeer. However, it will also be able to be tuned out by adjusting the more mechanical aspects of your suspension. For example, a stiff rear natural frequency can counteract the effects mostly. Modifying this about your car will also make it a lot more predictable and stable throughout the race, meaning that you can be more consistent over a long race. Another thing you can do is work with the ballast. Ballast is useful because it adds weight to the car, reducing its performance. However, you can move the ballast around to be most optimal for you. However, this is accounted for in the PP system. Another easy strategy is using the power restrictor. While you may want to tune the ECU instead, turning the power restrictor down means that you still preserve most of your torque, which means you can shift earlier while still having good performance and also have better fuel economy because of your early shifts. The final strategy is putting a racing manual transmission. What this does is it reduces the car's PP as long as you're driving a race car. And it also leaves more tuning on the table, so you can have longer or shorter gears to compensate for the change in shift time. Overall, it lowers the PP more than it hurts your performance. Alright, time for the final test and to show off all the progress that you and me have both made learning about tuning. This is the end of the video. Not much else to see. This is my first creation on YouTube, and my first video as a whole. This took a while, a couple days in fact, but hopefully y'all see that it was worth it in the end, and I hope you guys can pick us something up from the video. Oh, look at you sticking around for a post-credit scene or something. Yeah, that's gonna be a Miko tradition, hopefully. We'll see what happens with that though, but as it stands right now, this might be for bloopers or other dumb things. See ya.